Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Hunt Science Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Lance, a professionally certified wildlife biologist and natural resource professional, college professor, and owner of Land Source Consulting. The Hunt Science Podcast is dedicated to bring you the latest information on popular habitat management topics, wildlife science, hunting strategies, and the general conservation and land management practices to help preserve our natural resources. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you with us and hope that you enjoy today's episode. With that said, let's get started. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our primary sponsor, Land Source Consulting. Land Source Consulting is an Ohio-based wildlife and land management consulting company that I own and operate not only here in Ohio, but through the Midwest and beyond. At Land Source, we work with private landowners just like you to build and develop those property-specific management programs to help bring the goals that you have on your property to life. If you're interested in getting more information on who we are and how we can help you, please visit us over at landsourceconsulting.com. There you can check out the different service packages and capabilities that we can provide. We would love to hear from you, so don't hesitate to reach out to us and schedule that free consultation either through our website, or you can reach out to us and connect with us on our other social media platforms such as Facebook and Instagram. That's landsourceconsulting.com, building relationships for a more sustainable future. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Science Podcast. Before we get going, I want to thank everybody who is checking out the show once again. And of course, I want to give a big welcome to everybody who is finding us for the first time. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. If you have not already done so, please head over to the YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button if you're watching the video today. And of course, hit that bell notification so that you can be updated on all the future content that we put out here at the channel. Also, head over to other social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Follow the pages. Give us a like on some of our videos. Leave a comment. Tell us things that you want to see on the show. All of the above. We love to hear from everybody who's checking us out and consuming all of our episodes. All right. Now, on today's episode, we have Arron Bleise from the Fall Podcast. Arron is a Michigan resident and native whitetail enthusiast that lives and breathes hunting mature whitetail deer. Arron is also a very seasoned videographer and is passionate about combining his interests of hunting mature whitetails and capturing the hunt on film. So on this episode, we begin by discussing how to get started filming your hunt. For those of you that are interested in doing it yourself, maybe doing it with a buddy, all right, what type of equipment are you going to need, and not to go out and buy things that you don't need. Arron gives a great detailed breakdown on the things that he recommends and the things that he strives to recommend staying away from as well. Additionally, in this episode, we take a long look at the activities, the strategies, the land management, all of the things that Arron does throughout the year, all in hopes of helping him harvest that mature whitetail in the fall. This episode was absolutely jam-packed for the hunting enthusiast, the person that's looking for strategies and ideas on how to be more aggressive in your activities throughout the year and giving yourself a chance to harvest that mature whitetail like we all want to accomplish come fall. Now, as usual, we hope you enjoyed today's episode, and without any more waiting, let's get this episode started, and let's welcome Arron Bleise to the Hunt Science Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hunt Science Podcast. Today, I am joined by Arron Bleise. Arron, how are you doing, my friend?
Good, Eric, man. I appreciate you having me on here and reaching out, and I'm excited to do this. Like I told you off record, it's snowing again here. I've had big plans to get out and do some scouting this week just because we've had so much snow, and it's like now it's just pounding us, and I'm like, darn it, like I'm ready to get back out, and I'm getting cabin fever a little bit, you know?
Yeah, here in Ohio, like I told you two, we were talking, we've been pretty blessed. We haven't gotten pounded with snow like we normally do. You know, we've had a couple days where, you know, we've had some pretty good snow on the ground, but this has been a really weird and relatively warm winter. You know, even, you know, we were talking about the waterfowl project I have going on. Oh, excuse me. And, you know, it's been interesting because, you know, we're starting to see some hens, you know, nesting a lot earlier. They're starting to incubate earlier, and you're like, oh, and then we hit this cold spell, and now you're like, oh man, you're worried about the clutch and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's just been weird. And I imagine up there, I've seen some photos more of like the UP, you know, to where they've been absolutely hammered. And yeah, I mean, you guys seem to be getting it way more than we have. So that's, I'm not jealous. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I actually just did a podcast with a couple guys down in Texas, in East Texas. They're sitting around a bonfire. It's daylight, we're drinking beers. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like guys, we got like a foot of snow. It's like, come on, like you can't
Yeah.
tease me like that. So
Yeah, can you not put that on camera? That'd be
yeah,
great.
right.
So that's good, man. So, like I do with all my guests in the beginning, introduce kind of who you are, where you're from, where you grew up, and obviously as an outdoorsman, how did you get into, being the hunter, being the avid outdoorsman that, we are today as adults. Some people grow up as a rich hunting family. People who follow me on this show have heard I didn't get started into hunting until my 20s.
Okay.
So I didn't grow up into that rich, kind of hunting heritage and the family dynamic. So I'm always interested in the guests and kind of what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, like you said, my name's Arron Bleise. I grew up in, the lower peninsula of Michigan, like right in the middle of the lower peninsula. Um, I still live here. I only moved about 15 minutes away from where I grew up and just built a house last year. My dad and I built a house for my wife and daughter and I. And, um, you know, growing up, it was always, I was big into sports, but my dad was always a big hunter, and in Michigan, big deer camp tradition, and we always had a deer camp and had 220 acres of private ground that I got to cut my teeth on and kind of got spoiled on, to be honest with you. And then going through high school and everything, I was pretty ate up with deer hunting. I thought I was at the time until I, get to where I am at now. And I look back and I'm like, man, I wasn't even like scratching the surface to what like was really out there. And, I was fortunate enough to play a couple years of college baseball. And then once that was done, you know, I should go back. When I was 16, I started filming my own hunts. And I killed a deer on camera, with one of my best friends at the time. And my video productions teacher in high school let me edit the film and put it on for the announcements for the whole school to see. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And ever since I was 16, I'm like, man, I want to film hunts for a living. And, I fast forward to college, got to play some sports and then, got my degree in television and digital media productions. And then I got an internship right out of college. Turned into a full-time position, and I was there for almost 11 years, with Chris and Casey Kiefer. And I worked my way up to being the executive producer and everything with them, and doing shows on the Sportsman Outdoor Channel. And then I since moved over to Mark Peterson, and I worked there for 2 years doing the same kind of stuff. And now, just as of recent, I work for Latitude Outdoors as a content coordinator and kind of doing some other stuff like filming and editing with them as well. So that's kind of how, at a young age, I just knew I wanted to do the filming thing. And it just kind of fed into the deer hunting thing. But I always thought, I was like, I want to spend more time in the woods hunting. So let's get into filming. And that was the complete wrong way to do it, because I didn't get to hunt much. And honestly, I look at like a lot of the stuff back the last 10, 12 years, and I only got to hunt the times that I normally wouldn't usually hunt, because they're not the greatest of times, maybe late season or early season, because a bulk of our filming would be during the rut, obviously. And didn't get to hunt a lot of ruts, so I was trying to hone my skills on other times when I could hunt. And honestly, it made me a more of a well-rounded hunter, I think, because those are the areas I was lacking in. And that's kind of how I got into it. And now, just pushing the envelope a little bit more on, I've hunted public or private my whole life and dabbled with some public last year. And this year I'm kind of like dipping my toe a little bit more in. It's a little scary for me, just because, it's like, it's unfamiliar, you know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah.
ready for that challenge. So,
Yeah, it's going to be a whole new set of challenges too. Like
mhm.
you said, it's funny. I'm a college baseball guy too, and it's going back to you're talking about I would go film hunts and spend most of the time in the woods, but it's really not the case. It's the same thing with me. As a wildlife guy, I spent the first part of my career doing more veterinary medicine stuff, and then transitioned over as a wildlife biologist from there. And I'm like, okay, this is awesome. Like, I'm gonna spend so much time doing what you see on TV, or you start doing research and you see the photos, and it's like, man, it's 10%. It's 10% of the time. Like,
Mhm.
everything's reporting and paperwork and permit applications, and it just, oh my god, just all that stuff that you don't see. And I can imagine, because I have buddies too that film a lot of their hunts, and it's like the same thing. It's like filming, actually being in the stand is just such a small percentage of the
Yep.
time when it comes down to editing. And even starting this podcast, like if you really look at the time spent, actually recording episodes versus editing the episode and doing little mini clips and doing the social media and like all those different types of things, my God, man, the bandwidth is so far skewed the other way. So
Yep.
it's always good for people to hear because, yeah, I mean, it's always interesting. Like, I've talked to many students, I'm a professor as well, and they always are intrigued by the idea. They're conservation majors, they're environmental science majors, they're biology majors, whatever it is. It's like, okay, like that's awesome. I'm glad you want to do that, but you need to understand, like going into it, you need to learn. There's a lot of reporting. There's a lot of this kind of
Yes.
stuff, and the field work is only a certain portion of it. So that's good. So it's always interesting. I always enjoy talking with people and everybody who hunts and is an outdoorsman, but the people from Michigan and Pennsylvania are always I don't want to say unique, but the hunting heritage, the hunting culture is so huge in those states. And not that it's not in Ohio, but I think you have, and again, I don't have any numbers to back this up, but I think you have more, there's more of a concentration throughout the state, of people who hunt or grow up hunting in Michigan and Pennsylvania. In Ohio, I mean, you have your really heavy urbanized counties, just like you do everywhere else. But, if you're looking at like Cuyahoga County up towards, Lake Erie and Cleveland area and those types of municipalities, the hunting is not near as rich as it is in the southeastern, southern, even, other pockets as well. But it seems like those states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, it doesn't matter where you go, there is, a huge hunting culture. So that's always an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it definitely is. And honestly, I'm not taking anything away from a Wisconsin or PA or New York or Ohio or anything like that. I've been fortunate enough to be able to travel around just about every Midwest state, hunting or filming. And there are traditions in all those other states, but and I could be a little biased coming from Michigan, but there isn't one that's as strong as Michigan that I've seen yet. Now, there in another scale that I kind of get all this info from is I bring a lot of people in from out of state, like different, like, for example, I work with two guys. One's from upstate New York, or from New York. Now he lives in Ohio, and the other one lives in Ohio, and he was from PA. Brought him up here 2 weeks ago, and went up to my deer camp and everything, and actually took him to two of my deer camps, and like they were like just blown away, like as far as a kind of the size of the deer that we have. Because I mean, Michigan gets bashed on about, there's no big deer here, whatnot, and they're here. They're just not around every corner like it might seem in other states. Now, but when you go up to our deer camp, it is like, it's something. It's really, I don't even know what the word is for it. Like, it's just crazy how cool it is. And when you walk in, like I see people's faces like, oh my God, like I just want to be a part of this, and I've never seen anything like this. And it's nothing this big elaborate thing. We still run it off a generator. We cut our own logs and built it 22 years ago. And but it's just cool. You know what I mean? And the tradition there is like it's just it's second to none. And then I'm just talking on my scale. Like I know 15, 20 other deer camps in my area that do the same thing. And then you go to the UP, there is towns that shut down for the opening day of rifle season, or if not shut down, that's what gets them through the rest of the year because they know they have an influx of hunters that are coming up to stay and eat at the diners or, shop at the convenience stores and stuff like that. It's just, man, the tradition is I wouldn't say it's in its heyday anymore. It's definitely not, but it's still alive and well. And I think it's stronger in Michigan than anywhere else that I've seen.
Yeah, like I said, I grew up, didn't go into hunting until my 20s. So, even then early on, my group of friends that I was hunting with then, we didn't have deer camp. We talked and stuff throughout the season and hung out and everything, but there was never a deer camp. No one really had property. My newer group of friends, one of my friends is a really, really good buddy of mine. big avid outdoorsman, hunter, fisher, whole 9 yards. Well, he has a cabin in PA. So this past deer season was my real first experience with a deer camp. And I've had little exposures to it over the years. The first one I did a training when the NDA was formerly the QDMA. I did a training up at Kip Adams's farm over in Pennsylvania. And we went to his deer camp. It was housed at his deer camp, on his property, his family property. And I'm like, okay, around the fire, a bunch of guys telling stories about hunting. I'm like, this, and it was, there was electric and stuff there. So it wasn't like, generator ran and everything, but it wasn't like this huge amenity, luxury thing. It was a deer camp, and I was like, those kind of experiences as outdoorsmen, I think solidify everything, because even whether it's a deer camp, like, what you experience, what I've experienced, and what many people experience, it could just be, a group of friends, 5, 6 guys. And we were talking about this on the last episode that's already out, by the time this airs, with Mitch, we're in others, we've talked about this. It's the camaraderie. It's the jokes and the bashing on each other and that kind of thing in the group texts. And I mean, those kind of things, a lot of people just don't really understand. And I think as you're starting to see, hunting become even more popular with people like Rogan and Cam and all those guys on social media, and the Black Rifle guys and these big influencers on podcasts, talk about more and more and more and more, you're starting to see more people do it. And they're starting to realize what we've known for quite some time, like the camaraderie and everything. That's the attractive part.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, for sure. And that's, I also see like the deer camp thing is not to go off on too much of a tangent, but I have buddies that are kind of from other states that are like hunt like lone rangers, you know what I mean? Which is fine, totally fine. But I look at a lot of my friends that I grew up with, we all had deer camps. We were all hunting with people, you know what I mean? So it's like, even myself, like, yeah, I could go hunt by myself or scout by myself, but I'd rather have another person with me. Like, it's just fun having another person, a buddy or something with me. And that's just something that growing up in the, and what we've grew up in, and people around, and spitballing ideas, where you going, what this buck do, or where's he living, or all that, tactics and strategies and all stuff like that. Like, I love to do it with other people.
Awesome. Yeah. So looking here, I want to kind of transition a little bit before we start getting into the heart of what I want to talk about. But I want to talk a little bit, I know it's probably an elaborate thing, but you doing so much filming and things like that, for people who are wanting to get into filming their own hunts, whether it's by themselves, they don't have a buddy that is willing to go up an extra 8 or 10 feet
Yep.
in the other tree or whatever. What are some things you can talk about, as far as the person who just wants to go in it by themselves versus, hey, I got a buddy that's willing to do this. What's some advice and recommendations for people getting into wanting to film their hunts?
Yeah. So I'll first go, with the side of things of filming yourself. Now, I'm going to just talk from my experience. I've been filming all my own hunts since 2006, or not 2016, since I was 16. I'm 35 now. Either that has been me filming myself, or somebody filming me, and majority of the time it's me filming myself. But a big thing that I learned early on is, like, you see these TV shows or these other YouTube guys running these high end cameras and lenses and drones and stuff like that. First of all, like, if you're wanting to get into it, do what your budget can hold. Like, you could film with your phone if you wanted to, but learn how to tell a story. The story is going to outrule the quality. If you know how to tell a compelling story and a good story, the story is going to far exceed the quality, and the quality will come with it. And also, like, you don't want to spend a ton of money and do it for a year and be like, I'm done. You know what I mean? Because camera gear and stuff like that, it doesn't hold their value as much as something might. So definitely don't break the bank getting into it. One recommendation I would definitely have is, for sure, go into it with 2 camera angles, whether that is a main camera and a GoPro POV, something. At least have 2 camera angles, because it just makes the story and the listen, or the viewership, just their experience a little bit better when they're viewing it. So 2 camera angles if you can. If not, not a deal breaker. But then the other thing is like, don't boil the ocean as far as like thinking you need to get wireless mics and getting all this extra stuff. I'm a minimalist at heart. Like, I to this day, I hate taking in tons of stuff. I can tell you what I take in even now. Like, I'm a mobile hunter, so it's saddle hunting with sticks. And then my pack is like 832 cubic inches. It's not that big. And I take Lone Wolf Custom Gear pocket arm with a small head on it. I have a DSLR camera with one lens that I take and a POV camera and like two extra batteries. That's it. Like literally my whole setup is like 20 pounds, sticks included and platform. Like it's don't boil the ocean because for me, like a person like me, once it becomes work, it's not fun then. Like you gotta keep it fun. You gotta enjoy it. And then hunting becomes work once your filming becomes work. And it's like, you know, it just figure out your style and what you want to do. But don't think you need like this big elaborate camera with huge lenses if you're filming yourself. Now, on the flip side, if you do have a person that's going to film you and stuff like that, that takes so much pressure off yourself. Same kind of standard if you're just getting into it. Don't break the bank, but maybe you know adjust a little bit, get a different arm that's a little more user friendly than the pocket arm. The pocket arm is a really good arm for self filming, but for filming someone else, it's just okay. Maybe get like a muddy arm or something like that, and then definitely having a process with that person as far as like it's kind of like a point guard and a shooting guard. You can kind of make that pass without anybody like he's going to be there kind of thing. So
Yeah.
one thing I like to do when I'm filming someone or someone's filming me, when we get up in the tree, we go through all the scenarios right away. Like, hey, if a deer's here, can you film this? Where can you not film them here? Can you film them there? Get all that right out in the open right away, right off the rip. So you guys know when it gets the moment of truth, there's no confusion. There cannot be 1 ounce of confusion. You have to know that the guy behind you filming is on him and ready to go. And, it's just going to make you as a hunter better, in the moment of truth and not have to worry about him. And you're trying to get the job done on trying to kill this animal. Those are some things that I just kind of high level things that I would take in consideration if you're trying to get into either one.
Yeah. So as far as the POV cameras and stuff, do you ever dabble around with like the Tacticam or like the cell phone mounts, for the stabilizer, areas for your bow and things like that? I mean, because if you're looking at that, because that's one of the things I always kind of worry about too. It's like if you're running a chest POV, GoPro, or if it's on top of your head, it's like, okay, I'm looking at that buck, but as I'm going to draw back, like camera angle is going to matter as well. You're going to miss it. So, I mean, have you played around with those different things? Which ones work better? That type of things. I see all sorts of products out there. I was just at the open season, show, and there was a guy there that had a camera mount that would, I forget how it attached with your stabilizer, but you didn't have to take your stabilizer off,
Yep.
type of thing. So
Yeah, so I have played around with all that stuff since back in the day. The stabilizer camera, I don't like it. You can't, you every time you shoot, you jump and you never see the shot or anything like that. Honestly, if that's the route you're going to go, I'd rather just put like a GoPro over my head on wide where I can just put it on one touch and hit it and it's recording and it's wide and it just gets a
yeah,
big picture. I'd rather have that than, moving your bow around. Um, I've messed around with Tacticams. I don't personally like them. I think they're good quality. I don't like the cylinder because it's trying to keep it level and all that stuff. And the way the GoPros have designed themselves to where, and I'm sure with Tacticams you can use your phone to see what it's pointing at and all that stuff. But the newer GoPros, man, they've got screens on them where you can see the way they're pointing and what they're looking at, and you can control everything right from the GoPro and everything. And I'm a big GoPro fan.
yeah,
I've had really good luck with them. I've had them all the way since like GoPro 2 or 3 or something like that. Like I've had them, I've used them all. So I would use a GoPro, but and I would get away from using anything attached to your bow. Just adds more weight. It's not as sturdy or stable as footage and stuff like that. If anything, I would just do a wide shot behind you that just, point and shoot, kind of get whatever. And that's good. You also got to figure out like what you want to do with this footage. Are you wanting to just like show your buddies, or do you want to make it into something? Because if you're just like showing your buddies and just kind of throw it up on YouTube and just let it be there for memories for yourself and your family, yeah, just shoot a point and view above you and wide angle and let her rip. And then definitely figure out what you want to do with it, and then you can kind of go from there as well.
Yeah, the other reason why I asked too is it's not deer related, but me and my buddies are big waterfowl hunters. We get together with a group of 8 guys, and my other buddies with the deer camp. He's got a podcast as well with one of our other buddies that hunt with us, and we had kind of talked about it like, okay, how are we going to film? Like, we need to start filming our hunts, man, because the stuff that happens in the duck blind, man, or the
Yep.
layout blinds, you're
Yep.
like, good Lord. Some of it we might not be able to air, but it's raised the question. It's like, okay, do we get I've got the chest rig, I've got the head rig for my GoPros. I'm like, do we wear those? Do we get a Tacticam for the shotguns as well? But for me, like, same kind of concept. I shoot my 12 gauge with a Tacticam on there. That footage isn't going to be very, stable, so
Right.
it's like, do we hire someone to come film our hunts? Would that be better? Because if me and him are filming, like, we're not going to be in the episode, you know what I'm saying? So it's all these considerations on kind of the best way to do it, because then again, you have someone else and maybe in our group, and it's like, well, how good are you behind a camera, type of thing.
Right.
It's like, again, at that moment of truth, like, is it worth just, hiring some college kid that's a multimedia design or, something like that, production student, and be like, hey man, like, we'll pay you to come out for a couple hours and film our hunts. Like, we'll edit it, like, I have Adobe Premiere and I'm getting pretty good at editing, so it's like, we'll edit it, but we need someone to film it. So like, we can be ourselves and not have to worry, about that. So I always get curious, talking about that. And when I found out, you were doing a bunch of filming, I'm like, okay, I got to bring it up a little bit, because
Well,
people are probably always asking about it too.
yeah, and you got to understand, coming from me, I might not be the person to ask that, because I always look for like my return on investment. It's like I am so cheap. I am so, like, I squeak when I walk. I do not like to spend money on, like, it's so hard for me. And what I do is like I'll research, and I'll click out of the browser for weeks. And then it's just like I impulse buy, and it's like, well, I need it now. So like in that scenario, you know, you I would look at it personally like having a guy come out to spend, pay him a daily rate, which, if a daily rate is probably going to be around $200 a day for him to film for the day. If you're talking about a guy that's probably in a media field, in college, like, needing some experience, I'd probably pay
Yeah.
him, 100, $200 a day. And that's like, you got to figure if he's got his gear or whatnot, but, see what your ROI is on that as well. Like, are you going to get that money back, and the quality or the value of it? And, there's ways around it too, as far as like being able to, film with POVs. If you had enough GoPros stuck around the blind, just dead rolling and getting a lot of angles, and then having a chesty or a head rig, honestly, it'd probably work out pretty darn
Yeah.
good. And then the other thing is too, is like, there's YouTube channels out there that kind of live in a space. Like, there's a guy that's a whitetail hunter that he does all of his films where he doesn't speak a word. Like, that's his niche. Like, it's just like, you know, net sound, and he doesn't talk at all. And he blatantly like says that in like his, thumbnails and stuff like that. If you can find a niche that's like, you know, waterfowl hunting with POVs, like, if you,
Yeah.
you can ride in that niche and you like it, like that'd be something kind of neat though too.
Yeah, it's, because the other thing we've kicked around, or at least in my head, I can't remember if we've talked about it with them, but I'm like, okay, me and the other 2 guys, my other 2 buddies that have the podcast, it's like, hey, let's each get GoPros, chest rig, head rig, and then I've got 3 DSLR cameras that I buy. I'm not cheap, by the way. My wife hates it. Like, I have a real problem to where I'm like, listen, when I started this, I wanted to do, even for my in studio videos, I'm like, listen, so my cousin, people have heard this, are probably tired of hearing it, but my cousin he's got a degree in multimedia design production. He works for a big international corporation. He does their commercials, their podcasts, their live events, their interview. Like, he does everything. So when I started this podcast, I'm like, hey man, I don't know anything about this stuff. I'm not going to spend hours on YouTube. You tell me here's my budget. Here's what it is. So I got the mics, everything like that. So I wanted to get the cameras, and I'm going to get the 45 angle when someone's talking and stuff like that. And we tried the GoPros, and they're not mirrorless. And at least the ones that I had, and with the video switcher and stuff, he's like, listen, man, he goes, if you want to do this, he's like, you got to get DSLRs. I'm like, okay. In my head, I knew that was going to be the answer, but I was hoping I could get away with using GoPros and, just record right into Adobe Premiere and just, help editing and stuff like that. So anyway, so I've got DSLRs. So, I've got 3 of them that we could set up around our blinds and stuff like that when we're hunting. And then as, kind of a dead roll, and then us with the POVs. I think that's the route we're going to try, because we've talked about it multiple times. My God, the stuff that goes on. I mean, my buddies, it's interesting. Like I said, some of it we might have to put behind a paywall because of the language, but it's like, good Lord. But yeah, it's like, why are we not doing this?
Right.
Why are we not filming it and stuff like that? So, okay, so let's move in. So that's the talk with the cameras, because I know that's something I've had, thoughts about, doing, but again, the time frame and stuff with whitetail hunting, I'm usually by myself,
right?
So now that I have a DSLR, putting a long arm and doing a dead roll, type of thing might be something I play around with, but we'll see. We got time. So as someone who hunts a bunch, okay, let's talk about, what does your year look like? So here you're in Michigan, we're in March right now. You're itching to get outside. Like, what's your thought process, and how are you approaching the early part of the year in preparation for scouting? And we'll get into the other things that you kind of do.
Yeah. So a lot of it's snow dependent on me, and it's something I told you, like, off record, is like, if there's an inch of snow on the ground and it's like, there's no bare spots at all, I will not scout. I have to see dirt. I got to see the grass. I got to see scrapes. I got to see, the previous ruts sign. The snow to me gives me false pretense and false, information in a lot of ways. Like, yeah, it's great to know like where they're feeding late season maybe, but like I said, like, now with my new job, I can hunt a little bit more throughout the year, and I haven't had to hunt late season in a while. So like, coming into those first part of the year, like, I'm looking for snow levels and stuff like that. And once the snow's off, I'm going. If I can get an hour to walk, I'm going for an hour walk. If I can get a full day, I can get a full day. Very, very seldom I get a full day. But that's what I'm looking for, is first and foremost is snow. Not a big shed hunter. I do like doing it, but I always revert to, like, I like to scout. I put more, precedent on scouting, and I like to scout more, because then I can't multitask where the damn. So it's like, if I'm going out there looking for antlers, I'm doing this, looking in the trees, like where I need to, it's like,
Yep.
Why am I even doing that? Just go scout. If I trip over an antler, I'll get one, I like to be very, very detailed in the fact that, like, if I'm going to go out scout tomorrow, I've been scouting, e-scouting, and have a plan in place, and what stops I'm going to make and what areas I'm going to be going to. I like to be efficient. So if I know I get a day to scout this week, I'm doing all my due diligence beforehand to know that I can be the most efficient with my time. My time is very valuable. I've got a 5-year-old daughter and a wife that is a full-time nurse. And, when I drop my daughter off at school or daycare in the morning or something, I know that it's time to go, and I might only have a 3-hour window, and I might not have another one for another 10 days. So it's like, I got to make, hay while the sun shines. So me being the most efficient I can is key. So coming into, like, now we're in March, and in April, our turkey season is going to ramp up here in like 2 or 3 weeks. I do love to turkey hunt when it comes time. I'm not one that lies awake and waiting for turkey season. It is like the day, the week before opener, I'm like, okay, now I'm ready. Like, let's get into it. But before that green up, man, is I'm trying to find new trees or adjust trees, like prepping locations or stands or something where I need to from the last year. I've got it takes about 3 years, like, because I do still run some set stands. My wife does hunt as well. My dad hunts, and we hunt a lot of the same locations, and they like to hunt out of tree stands. So it takes about 3 years for a tree stand to grow into a tree. So you always got to reset those and then maybe tweak them and move them. Even with a saddle, because I love to saddle hunt. I in private land, I use those as well as, like, I might just go set up a set of sticks in a tree where I know that is a good spot that's proven over the years that I know I can just come in with my platform, put it on, and I can hunt. So it's like tree preparation or location, camera locations where I'm going to be putting scrapes, where scrapes, like big hub scrapes were, or um, uh, community scrape, stuff like that. Like, I'm taking note of those from the previous season and figuring those areas out. I've got two in mind right now on my family farm that I'm like, I really need to dive in deeper. And another thing I'd like to do is getting into those areas when I'm walking and scouting around those scrapes. I like to backtrack a little bit, find out where those deer are coming from, trying to figure out why they're using it, where they're using it at, what the there could have been a bumper crop of acorns or anything like that, figuring out what trees or what white or red oaks were dropping, and the rotation on those. So that's kind of what I'm doing in these times. Once green up starts happening, I wouldn't say I take a break, but it gets a little more difficult when green up happens. But I will take green up time to still do some stand locations and prepping trees for saddles and all that stuff like that. And I do so much e-scouting, so much e-scouting. My wife gives me crap all the time of, like, how much I'm on my phone or computer with OnX up, and it's something that I'm trying to get better at every year. I don't think I'm a very good e-scouter. I'm trying to get better at, and I've got buddies that are really good at it, and I try to learn from them. So a lot of hours behind that, and then just trying to implement those when I get boots on the ground. I know it's probably not the sexy answer, but that's kind of what I'm doing this time.
No, it's a good answer because it matches with the time frame of the year. Whether it's from my end, the management side, we're doing timber stand improvements, and also we're scouting trees, and we're trying to find stand locations, trying to find rubs, trying to find scrapes, and manage our timber accordingly. For me, it's the reason why I don't really shed hunt either, because I'm always looking at evidence of browse. What are deer eating in this timber stand, right? Is it something that I can manage to help proliferate and grow more of it? Is it something that I'm like, hey man, this is like an invasive species, I'm starting to look at this, like, why are they eating this? And I'm looking around like, what, this habitat needs some work, so I'm starting to look at the biological sign as well. I'm
Yeah.
looking for droppings, trails. I'm looking for coyote, scat. I'm looking for obviously rubs and scrapes and, things that I can set cameras up on. And again, like we were talking about, my family property, I don't really get to manage because the timber stand is not too big and I can't manage the hundreds of acres around it. So, like I talk, having a closed canopy timber stand, high stem density, small diameters, I can see 200-300 yards through, whatever. Those areas, there's a lot. I'm sure you've killed bucks in those areas. I've killed bucks in those areas. There's a lot of people listening to this who have killed big bucks in those areas, but understand what those areas are, right? So as I'm scouting an area, even if I'm incorporating management into my scouting, it's like, hey, you know what, man, there's a lot of rubs and there's a lot of scrapes in here. You know what? I think I'm just going to leave this. I'm going to leave it the way that it is. I've got food over here. I'm doing some timber stand improvement, some early successional management over here. So I have food sources and things like that. And I can set up here because there's a lot of good trees that I can set up here and get a travel corridor, looking through here. So understanding what it is and the way you're scouting, that's exactly what I think every serious hunter does. As they're out there when the foliage is not on the trees, I can easily see what limbs I need to remove and what trees a good saddle tree, a good stand tree, those kind of things. So for me, that's a good answer. Again, it may not be the sexy answer what people are looking for, but that's the realistic answer. Is that's what people are doing, and based on the ecology of not only the habitat but what the deer are doing, that time of year as well.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off what you said there too, like that I love to do land management stuff on our private ground. Like right now, actually, this last Sunday we were improving some fruit trees, and then we were also putting in a new food plot as far as like cutting trees down, and we're trying some different uh, food plot
Blends.
well, blends also, but just like trying to shape it a little bit better, kind of making it more
Oh,
like
design.
hourglass, like a design, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's in a pine tree. It's been in an old pine tree like plantation in a way. So I really feel like the soil's not going to be the greatest, so it's going to be like a lime. We're going to probably have to put a lot of lime down and stuff like that to get it grow up. But what we were doing is we were trying to like formulate a plan to where we're going to hunt on that plot, and then how the deer are going to move through there. But then, like, to go back on your point of like, this one scrape I was telling you about, you walk into this, it's a general rolling hills, but it's all oak trees. There's white oaks, red oaks, and everything. But you could hit a 5-iron through there and probably not touch a limb. To be honest with you, there's trees all over, but
Yeah.
you look at it, it's like the deer desert. It's like, why the hell would deer be in here? And it makes me scratch my head every year because this scrape was here. It was giant. It was absolutely giant. It was like they say like a truck hood. It was a big, big scrape. And I put a camera on it last year and let it soak. And then I pulled it at the end of the year, brought the card home, put it in, and started thumbing through. And this is where I really like to work off historical, like Chad, your buddy Chad, and I know Chad Sylvester from Exodus. They're big historical data guys. And that's what I've like kind of picked up on from them over the years is like, I went through here and there was like a 4-day stretch on this scrape that there was a shooter buck hitting this in the daylight for like 4 or 5 days straight. And I'm like, holy shit, like I need to figure out why. First of all, ask yourself why he's in there, because it's like you looked at it, it's like no good buck would walk through here in the daylight because it's wide open. Um, but also I look at like why, and then also what was dropping for acorns, because I'm going to come into this next year, and if the scrape's not there and the acorns aren't dropping, then it's very food dependent, very food based. And if the whites are dropping or the reds are dropping, but what this is, and like you brought up a good point, this is a transition zone. This is not a zone where they stick around and bed in it and wait, and call it a home. This is coming from food to, bed to food or vice versa, because, just off this scrape, about 150 yards is a big 65-acre destination of food, source. And, which I think it does manipulate the deer a little bit and how they use this staging, or it could be a staging area, but I honestly think it's just a transitional funnel basically. But I think it really hones in on like what acorns are dropping that year, if they are dropping, because if they're not dropping, I really don't think that scrape's going to be there. Now, that's going to be something I look for this year, is if it is there again this year, and acorns are dropping again. We had a really good acorn crop this last year. And if I remember right, the year before, I think we had a pretty good one as well. But yeah, you just never know with that stuff. So that's something I'm going to take into consideration also with that particular scrape.
Yeah, it's funny. I see a lot of community scrape areas in pine stands, conifer stands, evergreen stands, whatever you want to call it. And it's always one of those things. Now, usually the ones I see them in, they're pretty thick, and it's like, well, there's a lot of thermal cover here, and I could see them, bedding down, getting out of the elements, because these things go on for a little while. The wide open ones I really don't see too much, but I have seen them in the past, so it does kind of raise a like, why the hell is that thing doing here? Like I didn't expect to see that thing here,
Yeah.
and then, especially one that size, you're like, okay, camera's going on here. Like what is going on?
Yep.
Like this wasn't a 2-year-old deer that,
Right.
that did this one. This thing is huge. But anyway, so as we get into the green season, okay, springtime, early summer, whatever you want to call it, what does your guys' focus shift to? So you said you do a lot of land management. So what does that kind of look like?
Well, and that's, we'll be putting in, and once the soil temp and everything this spring allows it, we're going to start putting in spring
Yeah.
plots. And we haven't done many spring plots in the last couple of years, just because we were burnt on it a lot as far as the amount of food plots we do and the money that we put into it, and then our deer density is ridiculous. It's just, so it's like six half one dozen the other on it. But the years that we were doing spring plots, we were getting deer on the farm more. Our farm is very much like a passerby farm. It's a very much like our neighbors hold all the bedding, thermal cover in the winter, and our farm is just kind of like that passerby. So now we're really taking the approach this year of making it not so much like a McDonald's next to a Burger King, where we want like a variety. Like we want different food plots, like turnips, Nebraskas, and then we'll have some clover, but then also you know something else. We just want different plots, and just so people or deer can you know come over here and get like just a variety. And so once soil temp gets to the point where we can start putting in spring plots, we're going to start putting those in. And then once green up comes, it's either you know just maintaining those plots a little bit, but also I like to stay out. Like I hate going on the farm. I mean, I love it, but I hate it because it's like just let those deer feel like home. I mean, I've killed quite a few deer over the last 3 or 4 years just by strictly like staying out of the farm. Like just leave it as low pressure as you can, and being successful that way. It's a great time to shoot your bow. And just kind of make sure everything's dialed as far as gear there. And then once June, July hits, getting cameras out and casting a wide net. We love to run cameras and just a lot of glassing and everything. But when green up comes, I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't still doing stand or saddle prep as far as like different trees. And you may have not had enough time to get to it in the spring or something like that, and it's like I got to get in and do it and fight the poison ivy and poison oak and the ticks and everything like that. Yeah, we're still doing that, trust me.
Yeah.
But and then it's just kind of like if we need to maintain some food plots as far as spraying them or fertilizer or anything or whatnot, that's what we're doing. But we're just that's the kind of the months like on private anyway, where we're just like kind of letting everything just settle and just kind of do its thing.
Yeah, you brought up some good points that in my head made me smile because you're talking about the passer, a McDonald's next to a Burger King. I talk about that all the time until I'm blue in the face. The whole thing from the biological perspective is, I don't need it, but diversity is key, right? So for me, I don't really have a good name for it. I just kind of call it the mall model. As I said, why is it that you look at the shopping mall area, right? It's highly developed. Why are there so many people there? Because there's a high diversity there. If I need to go clothes shopping for my kids, I can go there. If I'm tired and I want to get a good steak and go somewhere with the wife and the kids, we can go to a good steakhouse. We can go to an Italian restaurant. We can go to, a department store, Home Depot, whatever it is. Like you can get everything you need in that area, right? And a lot of times I talk about the turnpike model to where, we're driving down a turnpike and there's nothing. Then there's this one little rest stop where I can go to the bathroom, get gas, get a drink, like whatever, right? A lot of times, especially in a lot of the whitetails range, that is the model that they encounter, which is why their home range is so big, which is why, densities are so big, because there's no habitat and they're constantly moving and trying to find that. The idea is that especially in the green up time, we want to make our property one of those designation spots. I want to, in a case like yours, hey, I'm going to stay out of it. I'm going to give them what they need to feel comfortable. I want cover to equal food. So I'm doing, early successional habitat management. And inside there, I'm sprinkling food plots in of different varieties and giving different vegetative diversity, communities in there to pull those deer in. Now they're not spending so much time on your neighbors to where now your property is the hub to where they want to spend, right? I think too many people look at the growing season to go, I just have to do food plots. Like that's what everybody does. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A lot of people do food plots. Food plots are great. But, I've talked about it on this podcast with Dr. Bronson, with Dr. Steve, Damaris from MSU and other, people on here. It's like, they're great and everybody uses them, but they're supplemental. What are you doing as far as your timber stand improvements? What are you doing as far as your early successional area, your grassland management areas for, I'm not huge on grassland management unless I'm managing for other species. Deer don't eat grass. I mean, if they do, it's a problem, right? So I want that weedy, I'm doing air quotes, weedy infested early successional area to where cover equals food.
Yep.
Because now I have food, I have cover for fawning, I have cover for, avoiding predation, I have cover, right? And I have food, right? So it's all those things that now you start setting up your stand placement. Now you start looking at, okay, I'm building this. I can see they're coming from the neighbors as a travel corridor from in here. Now I can set up here or between those areas or whatever it is. Now you start patterning those deer and you start building a deer program.
Mm-hmm.
That's the idea, especially when you have a farm or property that you can do that.
Yeah, we just had a pretty aggressive cut happen on our farm. We had a logger come in and take off. It was a lot for the popple, the repopple growth, but I don't even know what percentage it was probably of the farm. I'd say, I wouldn't even venture to say, but we took quite a bit off and it was aggressive. It wasn't a select. It was, hillsides gone, and we did that 3 years ago. And now the new popple growth in the understory and the stem count is ridiculous. It is. And it's going to be great and it's going to get better for the next 10, 15 years because, like I said, we don't have a ton of cover on the farm as far as bedding and places for fawning and stuff like that. Yeah, we have, probably a family group or two of does that live on the farm that actually called home, but I want those does. I want more does to stay there. And which in 10 brings the bucks, which, is so that's where, the logging came in and really helped. And you can definitely tell this year was the first year, like the third fall. I think it's the third fall that we've had. And you could definitely tell a big difference as far as the deer activity in those cuts, the rut activity in those cuts, and deer actually getting, as weird as it sounds, like you've seen deer actually do deer things again. Our farm is very monotonous, very like mundane, like not much, there is edge and there's cover a little bit here and there, nothing huge, but there's not a ton of terrain change. And this just made the farm hunt way bigger, if that makes sense, and open up some different pockets that have not been opened up in 30 years. So it's just going to get better and better. I think we're going to see the best part of it's probably going to be within the next 5 to 6 years. I would think.
Yeah. Find some areas, start doing some burning.
Well, and that's your point, like about the green up stuff. Right now we're actually probably this week or next week, we're going to open up some more areas for food plots. Now that everything's like basically cut, we are getting some regrowth, but it's like, this is the time now that we need to get in there and establish what we can. Probably should have did it last year, the year before, but now we got to get in, we got to get some areas. And I would love to burn, but I have 10 other guys that have to be persuaded in that. So we're not burning.
That's a big problem here in the Midwest. And I've talked about it a few times on here that, I went to grad school at Virginia Tech. So, more South. Burning's obviously big in the South and the West, those type of things. And it's just, I was talking with Dr. Bronson about this, and a lot of it just is cultural based, that we haven't really had to in the Midwest. I was just on a property yesterday, talking with a guy, and, it's an area, it was a municipality they've got a bad deer problem. So we're looking at doing, a lot of different things. We came across an area and I was talking to him. I said, one of their big concern is their timber. Their timber is just getting destroyed. And I said, you're not going to like my answer. And I was like, of course it is. I said, because you have nothing else here. Mm-hmm. I'm like, we're standing in a 50-acre field. Now, granted, it used to be an area where they disposed of, I forget what it was, but it's not anymore. It hasn't been for decades, but the soils are not very good. You can tell by the vegetation that's growing. Most of it's invasive. There's tree of heaven / tree of hell, I like to call it, Phragmites, and there you can see pockets of like broom sedge and things that are starting to come back up, but nothing. But I'm talking to him, I'm like, you guys haven't even like thought about managing an area like this. You're putting all this resource now, granted, into, good, beneficial, trying to bring your timber back. I said, the problem is you have such a high deer density that you need to start pulling them away from your timber and giving them some other food opportunities that they need on this property. I said, you need to start growing and establishing, consistent vegetation out here. Even though it's not the most desirable things for deer, it's carbon-based life, right? It's going to die, it's going to decay, and it's going to put carbon back into the soil, and you're going to start building, the soil back. I said, it's not going to be a short fix. I said, then you couple this with burning, and I said, you can burn here. You're in a park district. It's huge. You don't have people around. He's like, well, the public perception. I'm like, yeah, you got to change it. I said, it's not, there's a reason why people burn. And listen, that's a harder thing to do than most.
Yeah.
To change a public perception, whether it's an urban deer program, whether it's burning in an urban area and saying, hey, we're trying to build more better habitat for deer to get them stop, migrate, or you're traveling onto your property, eating your garden and things like that. Right. So I said, you got to be creative in the way that you do it. I said, but I mean, the fact of the matter is that's going to solve your problem. Everything else is plugging a hole until something else breaks.
Yep.
Welcome to municipality. Welcome to the government, local government, where people just, and then you have the public that, is going to say, no, I don't want that. Well, you're going to be the first one to bitch when you hit a 200-pound deer with your Mercedes and you're calling the city manager because, you got to manage your deer problem.
Yeah.
I've tried. I pretty much saw you at the meeting leading the lynch mob, trying to crucify me for, what we're trying to do. Like, I've got 6 biologists here telling you what we need to do, and you guys are getting it shut down. So that's my soapbox. But yeah, it's one of those to where it's like, the problem, but you can keep managing your timber all you want. Like they fenced off areas. I didn't say this to him, but they're fencing off areas is basically like big utilization cages to measure the browse. And he's like, well, yeah, we can get in, but deer can't get in. I got news for you. Those fences aren't high enough. Deer can get in. I didn't want to say that, but I'm just like,
yeah,
nah, they can get in there. Like, I'm looking through the woods. I'm like, that fence only looks like it's maybe 8 feet high. Like, they'll get in there if they want to. Now, younger ones, you're going to have a hard time. But anyway, it's like that on private property too. Like, understand those areas. Like, people get so tunnel visioned on what their individual goal is, which you need goals. You absolutely need to understand what you're doing, but how everything else is going to come into play is what people need to consider as well. And again, I was just on that property yesterday, and it brought it up to where I'm just out here. I'm like, there is so much opportunity out here. Again, it's going to be hard work to build this back up to where it's going to be, a really good area. But I mean, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of deer per square. I mean, just the density is insane. I mean, that's one of my colleagues at the university, they're out there doing, with thermal drones, getting ready to do, census counts,
Yep.
To try to see like, hey, what exactly are we dealing with, here,
I just did that on our farm too, because one of my good friends has a thermal drone. And so we did, we did it this winter, and we did a couple different tests as far as like, so one of our big issues with our farm is our main source of access is through our ag field, which is terrible. It sucks, but I wasn't here back in the 60s and 70s when it got established. So it's just something we got to deal with. But, my buddy and I were like, I'd like to do a test as far as like, let's show up early in the morning. And when I drive, I want you to fly the field, see what's out there. And then I'm going to drive in and act like I'm going hunting in the morning. And I want to see what these deer do. I didn't get all 4 tires off the pavement and all the whole field just like gone, So it's like, it is one of those things that where people are, you never want to access to an ag field. We get it. That's what is been said forever. But I wanted to know what actually happens. And I mean, you can see the red dots just scattering everywhere. So I'm like, okay, we need to adjust. That is one area we need to adjust. And that might be, hey, maybe we don't drive back to the cabin when we hunt one evening or in the morning. Maybe we take an e-bike, maybe we take a pedal bike or something, or try to maybe get permission on the neighbors in the backside to be able to like backdoor it. We need to adjust there. So the other thing was, he was like, how many deer do you think actually live on this farm? And I said, I want to tell you about 30, but what I'm going to tell you is I think about 6 live on this farm. And I think that's like 6 to 8 is what we're going to see today. Well, we saw 6 deer that day that were actually bedded on the farm. And I told him, I said, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of landowners think that they hold a lot more deer than they actually do. Now, in reality, I don't think they do. It depends on the size of your property. I feel like obviously your vegetation, your thermal cover in the winter, what you're holding, because the neighbors, they have a ton of thermal cover, and I do know that they hold a lot of deer late. So that's where I'm thinking those deer are. We have 2 cedar swamps, and I'm like, there's got to be deer in there. There was 2 deer in 2 big cedar swamps, and I'm like, man, that really was kind of fruitless. Like I was really hoping there was gonna be more in there. But that was just something that, like, you know, with this thermal technology, I think is going to be huge, because he's going to come back and we're going to do 2 more tests in the spring, the late spring and the summer, and just kind of see, like, and I want these data points of like, okay, where do we need to pivot here? Because you made a great point on, you need to stop focusing on your timber and get the deer away from the timber. That's the approach I'm trying to take. I want, it might not be 15 acres of food plots, but I want, 8 acres of food all over. That's my whole mentality, I guess. It might not be the right one, but I want food to be spread out, and it's making the deer have to move. Like I want their bodies to tell them they have to move. So we're getting them up and getting them moving and getting them all over the farm. That might not be the right way to do. I'm not a biologist like yourself. This is just what I feel like is right in my head.
Yeah. No, it's it just comes down to diversity. I tell people, you listen to like Dr. Harper, who's just a wizard, just a wealth of information,
Yep.
a habitat biologist, and he always talks about when you're managing your timber, as I should be able to look into my timber, be standing in the middle of it, and envision all the trees gone. It should look like an early successional habitat. That's the goal for deer. Okay. For turkeys, we can make some arguments because there is some differences between how you manage for turkeys and how you manage for deer. I want that herbaceous layer to be around the height of the hen, type of thing. You can barely see them and they can still see over that.
Sure.
That's good turkey cover. But for deer, their world is 6 feet down. So I want to be able to look into my timber. And in that case, if I can look into my timber and envision all the trees are gone, and that looks like that quote, here's my quotes again for people listening, the weedy mess, right? That is not a timber stand anymore. That's more of a woodlot, or a woodland area, right?
Yep.
It's got a mixture of vegetative communities that are conducive, right, for all ecological needs. So I want those areas. This is going to, painful as a biologist to say it, but I kind of want those travel areas as well. I want the more maybe closed canopy area, not this jam packed stem density that you normally see. I want to see, wider, diameters in the trees, but I want that kind of travel area, because those areas really, really stimulate rub lines and things like that we can say, hey, I can easily dictate and see where they're coming from or to bedding or food, right? I can see that. And as they're doing that, they're hitting these rub lines, and, oh, look, there's a scrape right there. Like, so now you can start really, your access comes into play, where you're putting your stand, things like that. And then, having other areas where, like you said, we're doing more of a clear cut and bringing it back up, or we're doing areas of hinge cutting. I'm not against hinge cutting. I don't get excited about hinge cutting, but I do it. It's just one of those things. So you start having those pockets, but at the end of the day, most people, they don't have very much food on their property. And they're like, well, I've got ag. Okay. I mean, ag is, food, but if that was everything, you'd have every deer in the area on that property. So it's not everything. It's one food source.
Mm-hmm.
If it was everything, they'd be there, but you don't have cover. And I keep bringing Bronson up, but in the episode I did with him, he even mentioned, he goes, he goes, I forget what he used to describe it. He goes, but I'm always surprised when I come to the Midwest on, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the lack of quality and adequate cover.
Yep.
Cover is our limiting factor, period. In the Midwest, we have good soils, we have ag everywhere, we have food, but we don't have cover. And that's why you're seeing, recruitment rates being lower. That's why you're seeing, deer more spread out. People aren't seeing deer as much as they normally do because, again, your field, people want to hunt a field. I hate hunting a field because deer can come out from so many different areas, but also they're not going to walk out in the middle of an open field. Most of the time, those are going to be nocturnal areas.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to put a camera up, at least from what I see. Like, yeah, of course. They're not going to, that 6-year-old buck did not get 6 years old being dumb.
Yeah. He's
not walking out in the middle of a field, whether it's beans, I don't care what it is. The likelihood of him going out there in the middle of the day, is very unlikely, type of thing. You're going to catch that buck moving, type of thing. And when he's focused on something else, but yeah, I could go on forever about the management and, that's the lessons learned. And some people are just, they're limited to what they have on their property. And if timber is what you can manage, then damn it, manage your timber. But if you're lucky enough to have timber, early successional areas, grassland areas, whatever it is, and you can manage that with ag and put screening cover in, and hey, I got access in the field, right? I don't want to do it, but you know what? I've got off this drip line is horrible harvest or horrible establishment for my crop. I'm going to put screening cover in. Like, I'm just going to use this for access. Like, I have no other option. I've got to go this area. At least, I can get through this field and, we'll deal with it from there. That's where your access planning comes in, but you got to make do with what you got.
Yep, for sure. That's the key right there. You got to kind of figure out what your goals and what you want to what you want to accomplish, and then kind of do with what you got, really.
Yeah. So what's your season? So now, okay, so we got through the green up, we got through the summer, early season. What's your focus and strategy on the early season hunt?
So the first 5 days of October, we open October 1. So in Michigan, if I'm just talking Michigan base, my family farm is 15 minutes away. It's all big timber. That's what we've been talking about. It's 220 acres, timber. And it's, part of a mile section that's like almost straight timber with a little bit of ag sprinkled in. But what I really like to do early season is here at my house, I hunt like ag, like 3 to 4 to 5 acre little patches of timber, little food stamps around, with wooded fence rows. It is some of the most fun hunting. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I put a lot of precedent on those first 5 days of October in ag ground. If like you talk about hunting field edges, I hunt a lot of field edges. Now I will tell you, I'm not hunting a 5 or 6 year old deer. I am hunting to try to kill a 3, maybe a 4-year-old. I can still get 3 or 4-year-olds to do that in a bean field around here. And those are, those deer are usually around 115 to or bigger, and that's what we're trying to hunt around here. So those first 5 days, I really hone in on ag ground here and really I do a lot of glassing, ton of glassing. Once they, all summer I glass, but once they turn hardhorn in that early September time, I am glassing, trying to get a pattern. I know it's going to change again, but I'm trying to get a pattern. And if it doesn't change, I always say you got a 3 to 5 day window, or I'll call it 3-day window to kill that deer. And then he's going to be gone for a little while. And there's about a 2-week transition that he's going to be gone. And if he survives, he will be back. So I try to keep the pressure low, glass from a distance, and then I do a calculated strike, and it's worked quite a bit. But that's what I'm doing. I don't hunt the mornings in ag ground early on. I just try to glass from a distance, glass from the road every night that I can, every morning that I can. And I really like to try, like, I'll take my daughter to school in the morning, and usually I'm back to my house and around the section around, oh, 8:30 or so, but I'll drive the section with the spot and scope, and I'll try to find a deer that might be transitioning back into bed, into the timber. And if I can get him going into that timber and I have permission on that timber, I will go hunt him that afternoon or later that day because I got a good idea he's going to be coming back out. So that is a tactic I use every morning. And then the other tactic is, lunchtime I'm glassing. And then if I'm going to hunt that night, if I don't have a good spot or a good nose of where he's going to come out or where I think he's going to come out, I'm probably not going to hunt. I'm going to glass. I spend a lot of time behind the binoculars and the spot and scope because in ag, I don't have time to mess around and go blow a deer out of the section. I have to be very calculated. I have to be very on top of everything. And I might only I work for one opportunity, and that one opportunity, I got to make it happen when it does. So that's my game plan early season.
Yeah, you brought a good point because I want to back up a little bit because I tell people hunting ag fields, like you described it, what you should do, right? Like you need to put a lot of time in understanding where they come in because around here, most people hunt ag fields, closed canopy. I can see 200-300 yards through. If you walked that edge line, there's 12 different deer trails of where they're coming in and out.
Yep.
And most people are just like, I'm going to set up over here. Oh, wait, they came out over here. I'm going to set up over here. And then they're back over here. Like there's no scouting. There's no patterning. There's like, hey, I'm going to go sit in a stand all day. Like you need to put in the work, type of thing because they are traveling from a lot of different areas. And just like you described, like you're glassing, you understand and putting the work where they're coming out of the field more often than not, where they're going back in, where they're moving, if they're moving to a different timber stand, whatever it is. So just like anything, you have to put the time in to understand that area. For me, I don't have the time to do all that. So I avoid the edges.
Yep.
And I look, and where food is and find travel areas from in there, looking for rubs and scrapes and things like that. Because like you said, that opportunity, especially come the rut and when really, the activity really starts ramping up, like those areas are going to be hot spots. For me, I just target the rut, the first 2 weeks of November, I'm in the woods. Like that's where I'm like, okay, here it is. I know I've got does going through here, and depending on where I am, I'm gonna have does or bucks chasing. They're gonna be, locked up with the doe. Like they're gonna be here, but I need to be here. Mm-hmm. And I have the same kind of methodology where I'm just staying out until those times, or where I catch them when they're not really too worried about some of the other stuff. They're worried about one thing, type of thing.
Yeah, and I don't, I call it hope hunting. I don't go in and hope.
I'm using that now. That's good.
I don't go in and hope he's going to walk by. I go in with a strike that like he's going to walk by or I'm going to screw it up kind of thing. Now, I used to be a hope hunter, because that's how I wasn't educated on it enough and how to, I just, and a lot of guys, they might be weekend warriors and they just have the weekend to hunt. I have the luxury of being able to like be pretty flexible with my job. So I can do that. I spend hours behind the glass every day. And I don't go in, like I said, if I don't have a good idea if that deer's in there, or if I know think he's going to come out, a good idea, I'm not hunting. I'm trying to get eyes back on him or another deer or whatever. I'm moving. I got to move. And early season's so tough. It's so tough of where, like you said, where he's going to come out, if he's even in the area, will he move in daylight? Is it too warm? And I've really learned too, if I can get a rain in those first 5 days of October, I'm going to probably kill a deer. If more times than not, because I love getting into a tree while it's raining. And if I know it's going to stop that deer, it's
going to be up and moving.
Yeah, I love hunting rainy days,
Yeah. And plus the sound of the rain kind of masks your sound getting
100%.
in, type of thing too. It sucks, but
yeah.
Hey man, if it was easy, everybody would do it,
exactly.
Type of thing. Yeah, but even like the weekend warrior, I mean, I consider myself a weekend warrior. I don't go out and scout that much. but I got bird dogs and stuff. And my dogs are always out in the woods with me. And I know people are like, oh my God, but I'm like, listen, my deer are used to my dogs. They're used. It does not bother them at all.
Yep.
Is that maybe, years ago when I first moved there and started doing it, but now, I mean, they're used to the dogs. They're used to the scent. I take the kids back there, the dogs back there. Like, it doesn't do anything, so for me, that's, I go back there and I'm looking for, in the off season right now, I'm looking for scrapes. I'm getting my apps out and I'm tagging, here's an old rub. Here's a, old scrape, I'm seeing these things. Here's a trail, I'm mapping the trail. I've got really high end GPSs for work that are sub-meter accurate that I can take like line generics and I'll just walk a deer trail. And that thing's, I'm sub 1 foot accuracy that I can throw onto a map, with ArcGIS, and I can make my own map and go, okay. And I can start looking at the fingers where all these trails are. And I can find those convergent points and go, okay, there's food there. Well, all right. Now we start
I
looking
like
for trees.
that. I need to get one of them.
Yeah. Well, they're about $2,500, and if you squeak when you walk, that's a hard one to come off of, because then you got to have the software to use it.
Right, for sure.
But for one of those things, for me, it's just a luxury of what I do for a living. So I have those, and being able to look at that data. I mean, you can get a lot of data as a weekend warrior, just going out there and saying, what, I got an hour or two Saturday morning. I just want to walk the. You should enjoy being out in the woods. If you are a hunter, you should enjoy going. You don't have to put a single seed in the ground. You don't have to touch a single tree as far with a chainsaw, but going out there and understanding the piece of land that you hunt, just to see where they're moving, just to find a good tree to sit off the trail. Like those things you can collect data on, and you just got to want to do it. So first season, or excuse me, early season, now we're starting to see the shift. Now we're starting to see the chasing phase, and we're starting to get that peak to where we're getting to the peak rut. How are your strategies, changing from there?
Still throughout October into probably around October 25th to the 28th or 9th, somewhere in there, I'm still glassing. I hunt a lot of ag. I don't hunt as much the big timber as I would like to, and it needs to change a little bit just because. But like I told you earlier on, the old adage, I don't like to leave deer to find deer. If I got them here, why am I leaving them, kind of thing. So I still take the same approach as I'm glassing every morning, glassing in the evening. If I don't have a good pinpoint on where one's at or what he's doing, I'm probably not diving in unless I have a good wind and things are setting up historically. I've got a historical scrape that is, I talk about it a lot on my podcast, but like from October 13th to like the 17th or 18th, somewhere in that time frame, there is a mature deer that hits it around 10 o'clock in the morning until noon every year in that time frame. So for me, historical data is another big one as far as camera surveys and stuff like that. I run a lot of cameras. I shouldn't say a lot. I run about 7 cameras. There's guys, I feel like that's probably low now for what guys are running, but a lot of it's historical stuff on scrapes. But if I can pinpoint an area like that is where I might quote unquote hope hunt, where it's like I'm going in for, historically the last 6 years, a deer is a shooter buck has done this. I'm getting in that area and hoping he comes by. So yes, I do hope hunt a little bit there, but I'm majority of the time making a surgical strike. Now, coming into the rut is more of hunting the does. I know that sounds very cliche and everything, but I am trying to figure out where doe family groups are. And in the ag here, I'm around it all the time. So I know that there's a doe family group that lives in this little section of timber or travels this fence row just about every day, because I have the luxury of being able to see it because I live right here. So really honing on those doe groups as well, because I know eventually one of those is going to pop and I'm going to be, in the chips. So getting into areas like that are key, and that might be like, this doe group lives in here. And, I'm trying not to give away too much because people that might listen to this will know. Um,
So where are we living,
yeah,
man? I
yeah,
get it.
it
Don't worry
sucks.
about it.
It really sucks.
Yeah.
But I have a piece of timber that's about, uh, we'll say it's less than 5 acres. There is a side of it that holds really good bedding, and I can slip in the back door and hunt a community scrape that just about every buck comes by and touches, in the rut phases. So it's more of like a matter of time type of deal. As long as I can get in there, it's not a very big group of a big patch of timber. If the wind's right and I can get in there and slip in there, more times than not, I'm gonna get an opportunity. It just might take a couple days. It might be boring hunting, but that's how it is in ag. You might see deer 3, 4, 500 yards away, but a lot of times you're not going to see them within bow range. Like you said, they could come out over here, you move over there, they come out over there. So it can be a chess
Yeah.
match. But getting into the ag side of things, that's how I'm doing it. But now if I do do a big timber, I want to throw a scenario like if I go to Ohio and do a big timber hunt or somewhere in the Midwest, I'm boots on the ground scouting a lot. If I don't find the sign that I want, I'm moving. I might burn 3 days of scouting before I even get in a location where I want to hunt. So I'm more of the mindset of like I need to find something that I'm really excited about and I know it can happen, and then I'm going to pounce that. I don't like just going to hunt just to hunt. Um, I've tried to make my time more efficient, but I feel like if I can spend 4 or 5 days, if I have to scout or glass or do something to find that spot where I know he's going to be, and I only get to hunt it for 2 days, well, that's the risk I'm willing to take, and that's kind of my approach, even in the rut phases.
Now the infamous post rut late season.
Food, man.
Those yeah, what was that?
Food, man.
Yeah. It is a challenging time, to hunt because most people don't have food.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's one of the things in those late season. If you're lucky enough and you're one of those people that plant, cereal grains and things like that, and I mean, you're gonna have you're gonna be okay. You just got
Yeah.
to get in the stand,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, good. What were you gonna
Well, I
say?
was just gonna say, like in Michigan here, my food is basically all gone.
Yeah.
With the ag stuff, it's all tilled under usually. So it's once everything's are tilled under in ag, it's in my scenario, it's a barren graceland. Like there's nothing here.
It's
Now
same
with
here.
with the timber stuff though, if we got plots that we grow, we might have a turnip plot or something like that we could get onto. Um, that might be something I gravitate towards. But honestly, transitional pieces from bedding, trying to get close to bedding again. It's kind of a role reversal back to like the early season of like uh, glassing, how I like to do it, like maybe a food source. But if not, really trying to find those bedding areas that the deer might still be in. And to me, there's no second rut. I've never seen a second rut, no matter where I've ever hunted. The rut is just the rut. I don't see like a young fawn might come into estrus in December, but like how like minuscule that is to see that, like you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like I'm not banking on a second rut. I'm more transitioning into like the tactic in December that I need to be following other than like the second rut, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get focused on like you're going to see this big, peak breeding activity like you do in the initial rut. That's not the case. I mean,
Nope.
that second rut is really, we can get in a whole bunch of rut biology, but the generality, the generalization of the second rut is those those doe fawns that were dropped late. They were not able to reach sexual maturity in time because of probably more than likely poor habitat,
Yep.
to where they meet sexual maturity. Now they're able to be bred, or yeah, there's more to it than that, but that's really what the second rut is. Like you said, it's such a small percentage of the does within the population that you are probably not going to see it. You're not going to see bucks going crazy, looking to tend another doe, things like that. For the most part, is
Mhm.
there going to be outliers? But looking from a macro scale, it's not as significant.
Right.
There's a lot of, Bronson did a really good, again, the episode I did with him, he really outlined, and we talked about the rut, a lot. So, that was a good episode for anybody listening. Go back and listen to my episode with Dr. Bronson Strickland. And, we talked about, what the rut actually is influenced by, that type of thing. So, but yeah, like you said, it's the same thing. A lot of people are like, oh, I didn't get one in the rut. Let's wait for the second rut. It's like, man, most of those bucks, if they're still around, especially here in Ohio, they went through the rut and they went through gun season. They're smoked. Like, food and like they're smoked, type of thing. So
Yeah.
it's just not what you think it's going to be. And most of my friends that, do successfully harvest, really good deer in the later seasons and in the end of December, January, it's over food. I got one buddy that puts like, he plants like a 5 or 10 acre bean field. And then it just stays all year long, and he plants some other stuff over there, and come late season, he's got some cereal grain mixtures in there as well. Come late season, because of his job, he's like, man, I get out, but he goes out in January and he'll smack a big buck, as we get closer to the end of the season. It's just like, you son of a bitch.
Yeah. Yep.
It's like, yeah, but for me, I'm like, I put so much effort into the early season and into the rut because, listen, man, I'm not old by any stretch of imagination, but I do not want to sit in a tree stand when it is freezing ass cold outside. Because guess what? It's waterfowl season. Like,
yeah. I'm the same way.
I've got, yeah.
I'm the same way. I'm going to try to kill, our gun season is November 15th and our bow season's over by then, even though it goes later. After November 15th, I'm not hunting much. Like there's the way my property's set up and everything, and the gun pressure we get, it's just either all the deer or all the good shooter bucks are in hideout, or they're dead, or it gets really difficult if you don't have an area that's not pressured.
Yeah, I'm usually going out. If I go out after, like I said, I shot my doe early, and then I shot my buck second week of November. He was locked up with a doe, and I got him, and then I was pretty much done. But I go back out, a couple more times, if the fair weather hunter, I guess, but the weather's good, like maybe get another doe or something like that. But honestly, for me, the 2 deer is plenty.
Yep.
So I usually just, I have a tag and let it go, type of thing, unless, for some reason I didn't get a doe early on, for work or whatever, I'll go back out. But generally, mid-November, I'm pretty much done too. Like I'm shifted. I'm hitting waterfowl hard.
Right.
Now it's, our season ends, I can't remember when, December sometime. But I'm hitting it hard. Like
right.
because again, my kids, I got 2 daughters, 14 and 11, and both play travel sports, are real active. So it's like, I'm the same way, man. Like I can't hunt in the morning and in the evenings and my wife be very happy with me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, we're going to go in the weekend in the mornings, because waterfowl hunting, I mean, you're done by like 10 a.m.,
Yeah.
type of thing. So it's like, all right, I'm going to hunt hard in the morning, and then, maybe nothing's going on that evening. I might go sit, most of the time. I've had times where I've gone to sit out because it's been pretty nice out. I've gone into a stand and I didn't even take my bow. Just like, cause our archery season goes into February,
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, just like, all right, I don't need another deer. I'm not going to shoot another deer because I want to,
Right.
I just go out there and just kind of see what's going on, just go kill some hours out in the deer stand. So
That's cool.
okay. Last thing I wanted to bring up, do you do anything as far as data collection, like on your harvest or anything like that? Do you guys record, as far as a program? Are you looking at age classes? Are you looking at, weights? Are you, and using that to kind of influence next year's, strategy and management decisions?
Yeah, we are. I mean, I guess I shouldn't say we are. I'm doing it. I've been doing it since 2019. I wish I would have started earlier. As far as like data collection, before the harvest, I report all of my hunts. I've been doing it since 2012 in a log of, um, day of the week, the date, the year, the barometric pressure, the moon phase, the wind, the speed, like all that stuff, and where I sat, notes, and And I just like to try to find a correlation of, from year to year encounters, what happens if I killed, if not, and then all the bucks that I've killed since 2008, I've taken data points from there, the same kind of things. The days I killed them on, the weight. I do check all the weights. Eight, since 2019, I've been aging them all, sending them in and actually get them the cementum done
Annually.
to get them aged, and it's mind blowing, mind blowing. I found out that in Michigan, I don't think a lot of people know how to age deer, me and myself included, on the hoof. Um, because, for instance, one of my best friends back in 2018 or 19, I can't remember. He shot 2 bucks. We can kill 2 bucks in one sit if with our 2 buck tags. I think it was October 4th. He had both these deer on the farm. He knew about them. One deer comes out, he shoots him. Like 52 minutes later, the other deer comes out and he shoots him, kills both of them. The first one he killed was a 144-inch deer, and the second one was a 138. And he had pictures of both deer the year before, and he goes, I helped him track him, everything. We get him back to the barn that night, and we're weighing them and just kind of having a couple drinks and just kind of BSing. He goes, "What do you think the age?" And I'm like, "Man, at the 144, I looked at him, his body size and, his head and his chest and everything. I'm like, man, if he's not 4 years old, I don't know. I'd be very shocked." And then the other one just looked like a 3-year-old, just how his body and his structure. And I try not to take antlers into aging at all, because to me, like, some people are like, "Oh, they won't grow mass that at that age." How do you know? We don't know. Like, it's just crazy so I try not to look at the antlers and really judge off age there, but he got them both aged. They were both 2.5 years old. And I'm like, right then and there, I'm like, that is ridiculous. Like, ridiculous that those are both 2.5-year-old deer, yada yada. So fast forward 2 years after that, I shoot a deer. I was chasing a deer, and just a big bowling ball of a deer. He only had 6 scoreable points, but he was kind of wider, but he just was a clean 6. It looked like he was just kind of an inferior deer. Had a Roman nose, his chest and his body all went together. Like, he just looked like he was just like a wrestler. You know what I mean? I had 2 encounters with him, but I saw him a lot that year glassing. But I had 2 in tree encounters with him. Couldn't get him killed. Fast forward to the next summer, he shows up again and he's got like 10 scoreable, but you could definitely tell how his rack was and how he was. So I watched him all summer, filmed him. I'm like, this deer is a 4-year-old, 100% a 4-year-old, just looks like an old deer, everything. I end up shooting him on November 3rd. He live weight was 250 pounds and he aged at 3.5. And I'm like, what in the hell do I have to do to get a 4-year-old? And why can I not, and then, so fast forward to this year, I shot 2 bucks this year. One was like mid 1 teens and I sent his teeth in, haven't got it back. I figured he's a 2-year-old. And then I shot a buck that was in the low 140s. I figured he's going to be a 4-year-old. He was 240 pounds in the hoof. And I haven't got the teeth back on him yet, but yeah, it's just it's a long way of saying, yeah, I do the weight and I age the deer just to kind of get a correlation. I shot a buck in Kansas a couple years ago. It was 5.5 and scored in the mid 150s, and he looked like a 4-year-old to me. So it's like, it's so difficult to age on the hoof, but being able to get that data from the teeth, and it's not 100%. I think what they give me is like 97%. Like, that it's probably going to be
pretty damn close.
It's close.
Yeah.
A lot closer than I can get by aging on the hoof, and a lot closer than anybody that I've ever seen do a jawbone. I've never seen anybody do a jawbone like
the jawbone, the tooth wear replacement is it's a lot more accurate than on the hoof. I don't know statistically,
Yeah.
I don't, I at one point was pretty good at on the hoof. You don't do it long enough. I just, I don't like doing it on trail cameras. Like I'll look at him like, I'll tell you what I think he is, but I want to get a hold of the jawbone. Jawbone, you can get pretty close. I'm more comfortable with that. I haven't been too far off with jawbones, but I spent a lot of time looking at jawbones.
Sure.
I mean, I've pulled, my God. I mean, even my friends' deer, like that's always the thing. I always want to capture data, but it's getting my friends to fricking do it. I'm like, hey man, call me to get a deer. Like I want a jawbone. Like I want a jawbone. I got a box full of these things that I've preserved, and I've wrote on them with Sharpies and drew where the teeth, just for like education purposes. Yep. But I'll get out there with calipers and measure the different wear and the dentin and stuff like that. Just to kind of look at it. It's just good. Just it's an easier skill. But the cementum, that one is a far better one to do. Like you said, it's 90 high 90s
yep.
Percentage. For me, but it's always interesting because I've had them where I've tooth wear replaced and I'm like, holy shit, this deer's 2 years older than I thought it was, and you start looking at it, you're like, I mean, it just goes to show like, you got to take into like all the data you can. Pull a jawbone. I think it's this age class this way. Oh, okay. Well, you start looking at it, and especially if you're trying to field age, a buck during the rut, when they're swollen up and things like that, and you're not looking at normal, body condition and things like that. Like it can be, that's tricky. That takes a lot of experience.
Yes.
You watch guys like Kip and Matt, guys from the NDA and, in the Quality Whitetails magazine, they do the deer aging and stuff like that. And they'll put it on social media once in a while. Those guys, they're pretty damn good at it, but they spend a lot of time looking at morphological characteristics of deer and in both pre-rut and rut, and they can get it narrowed down pretty good. And then you give them a jawbone and like, well, maybe he's, so it's just like anything. The more experience you get with it, but yeah, it's always fun because I try to keep as much data as I can. I'll use a weight tape, on mine just to, in the field, get a live weight and expect a dressed weight, that kind of thing. I'll age them, of course, sex them, see if they're, if it's a late season harvest, do they have, were they pregnant?
Right.
That kind of thing. It's always good to be able to measure the weights in particular, because I really want to see, I want to see a weight like going up. I want to see the weights are increasing, which means they're getting resources, which means my ruts are going to be more intense because I've got more does coming into estrus. I don't have that secondary rut, quote unquote, coming in. I know I'm bringing the deer up to, sexual maturity in time, those first year deer, and just all the above. Data's good, no matter how way you cut it. But anyway, Arron, man, it's been awesome. We're at an hour and a half almost, a little bit more. But this is exactly what I wanted. Yeah, to really talk about strategy and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of information in here that people are gonna like. So yeah, I want to thank you for coming on. Why don't you tell everyone how the best way, plug your podcast, how's the best way to get a hold of you? People want to get a hold of you. What's the best way to do it?
Yeah, first of all, I appreciate Eric for having me on, man. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully I didn't stumble over my words too much.
No, you're good. That was good.
But yeah, my podcast is called The Fall Podcast. You can get it anywhere you download your podcast. I do an episode every Tuesday and Friday. And, you can go to my website, fallpodcast.com, or Instagram, Facebook, social media, YouTube as well, Fall Podcast. I do a lot of video podcasts, and a lot of my hunts from the past years are on my YouTube channel. So if you guys want to see some hunts or anything like that, go check that out. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And again, man, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, awesome. All right, man. Well, everyone, I want to thank you for staying with us this whole time, and we look forward to seeing everybody here next time. So until then, we'll see everyone soon. All right, everybody, that wraps up another episode here at the Hunt Science Podcast. I want to thank everybody for checking out today's video. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you have not already done so. It's easy. You can click right here. It's going to subscribe you to the page. Of course, if you like today's video, also help us out by giving us a like, by hitting the thumbs up button, and of course, hitting that bell notification so that way you can be updated on all the future episodes and future content that we put out here on the channel. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We can't wait to see you guys again on the next one. Until then, everyone, thank you for checking out the Hunt Science Podcast, and we'll see you next time.